I want to tell you something that might shake you a little bit. A woman who knows how to say no without explaining herself, who can walk away from chaos without raising her voice, who refuses to shrink herself to make others comfortable. That woman has discovered something most people spend their entire lives searching for. And here's what shocks people. Men don't resent her for it. They respect her deeply, instinctively, even the ones who initially resist it. Now, before you dismiss what I'm saying, before you think this is about being cold or distant or building walls, let me be clear. I'm talking about something far more powerful than that. I'm talking about a woman who has learned to protect her peace like it's sacred ground, because it is. And when a man encounters a woman like this, something inside him recognizes royalty. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you become when you finally understand your own worth. You see, I've spent decades studying human behavior, relationships, purpose, and what makes people truly thrive. And I've watched this pattern repeat itself over and over again. The woman who learns to guard her emotional energy, who refuses to be pulled into every drama, who can sit in stillness while the world rages around her, she becomes magnetic in a way that has nothing to do with her physical appearance. She becomes untouchable not because she's isolated, but because she's grounded. And men feel it. They might not have the words to explain it, but they feel it in their bones. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. How many times have you abandoned your peace to accommodate someone else's chaos? How many times have you said yes when everything inside you was screaming no? How many times have you twisted yourself into shapes that felt unnatural just to keep someone else comfortable? And here's the harder question, what did that cost you? Because I'll tell you what I've seen it cost people. Their joy, their clarity, their sense of self, and ironically the very respect they were trying to earn by being so accommodating. You can't earn respect by abandoning yourself. It's impossible. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it never fills up. You see, many people think that if they just had more money, more success, more recognition, they'd finally be satisfied. But that's the trap, that's the deception. Because purpose isn't about accumulation, it's about contribution. It's about giving what only you were designed to give. Let me tell you something that changed my life. When I discovered this principle, everything shifted. I realized that the wealthiest place on earth isn't the oil fields of the Middle East or the diamond mines of South Africa. The wealthiest place on earth is the cemetery. Think about that for a moment. The graveyard is filled with dreams that were never pursued, books that were never written, businesses that were never started, songs that were never sung, inventions that were never created. All that potential buried 6 feet under. Why? Because people spent their entire lives chasing the wrong thing. They chased success instead of purpose. They chased wealth instead of assignment. They chased approval instead of calling. And here's what breaks my heart. Many of them were busy. They were active. They were even accomplished by the world's standards. But busy doesn't mean effective. Activity doesn't equal productivity. You can be climbing the ladder of success with great speed and determination, but if that ladder is leaning against the wrong wall, every step takes you further from where you were meant to be. I've met millionaires who were miserable. I've encountered famous people who felt empty. I've spoken with powerful individuals who sensed they were powerless over their own destiny. Why? Because they had everything except the one thing that matters. They didn't know their why. They didn't understand their purpose. Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. If money were no object, if you had all the resources you needed, what would you do with your life? What would you give your time to? What problem would you solve? What would you create? That answer right there is often connected to your purpose, because purpose always seeks to serve. It always looks outward, not inward. Now, I want you to think about something else. Think about the things you do where time disappears, where you get so absorbed, so completely engaged that hours feel like minutes, where you forget to eat, where you look up and the sun has set and you didn't even notice. That's not just passion. That's a clue. That's your inner design speaking to you. Because God doesn't just assign purpose, He wires you for it. He builds the capacity into your very being before you ever recognize it consciously. I've watched people come alive when they discover this. I've seen accountants who thought they were just good with numbers suddenly realize they were designed to bring order to chaos, to help people build generational wealth, to create systems that protect families. I've seen teachers who thought they just liked kids discover they were called to shape the thinking of the next generation, to break cycles of ignorance, to plant seeds that would grow long after they're gone. You see, purpose is never small. Even when it looks ordinary, it's never small, because it's connected to eternity. It's connected to impact that ripples beyond what you can see. Here's what I know for certain. You were not created as an accident. There is no such thing as a purposeless person. None. You might not have discovered it yet. You might have buried it under other people's expectations, under fear, under past failures. But it's there. It's been there since before you took your first breath. And until you find it and walk in it, there will always be this restlessness inside you. This sense that something's missing. This feeling that you're capable of more, meant for more, designed for more. Because you are. Your purpose isn't hiding from you. You're hiding from it. We spend so much time asking God to reveal our purpose when often He's already shown us and we're just too afraid to step into it. Too afraid of what people will say. Too afraid we'll fail. Too afraid of the cost. But let me tell you something about cost. The cost of living outside your purpose is always greater than the cost of pursuing it. The cost is depression. The cost is regret. The cost is sleepless nights wondering what if. The cost is looking at yourself in the mirror 20 years from now and not recognizing the person staring back at you because you've become someone you never intended to be. You know what's expensive? Waking up at 65 years old, standing at a retirement party where people are celebrating your career and feeling absolutely empty inside because you spent 40 years climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. That's expensive. That costs you your life. I'm not saying the journey will be easy. I'm not selling you a fantasy. Purpose always requires sacrifice. But here's what you need to understand about sacrifice. It's the difference between giving up something good for something great versus settling for something mediocre because you're afraid of what greatness might demand of you. Every single person who has ever lived a life of significance paid a price. Every single one. Moses had to leave the palace of Egypt. David had to face Goliath when his own brothers mocked him. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. Martin Luther King Jr. knew the threats on his life were real, but he kept marching anyway. And you, yes, you sitting there right now, you have something buried inside you that the world is waiting for. But it's going to require you to be uncomfortable. It's going to require you to have conversations that make your palms sweat. It's going to require you to invest in yourself when your bank account says you can't afford to. It's going to require you to stand alone when everyone else is sitting down. But here's the truth that will set you free. The moment you commit to your purpose, the universe conspires to support you. Resources you didn't know existed begin to appear. People who can help you show up seemingly out of nowhere. Doors you thought were permanently locked suddenly swing wide open. Why? Because purpose attracts provision. When you're aligned with your assignment, everything you need to fulfill, it begins to gravitate toward you. I've watched this principle manifest countless times. A young woman in our ministry felt called to create educational programs for underprivileged children. She had no money, no building, no resources. But the moment she stepped into her purpose with faith, doors began to open. A businessman she'd never met offered a building. Teachers volunteered. Curriculum materials appeared. Within 6 months, she had a fully functioning program touching hundreds of lives. This isn't magic, it's a divine principle. When you discover what you were born to do, the universe conspires to help you accomplish it. Resources that seemed impossible to access suddenly become available. People you need to meet cross your path at precisely the right moment. But here's what most people miss. Provision follows pursuit. You can't sit in your living room waiting for everything to fall into your lap. You must move toward your purpose with intentional action. The provision meets you in motion, not in meditation alone. Think about it this way. If I tell you I'm going to drive from Miami to New York, but I never leave my garage, will I ever arrive? Of course not. The road doesn't come to me. I must get on the road. And once I'm moving, I'll find gas stations when I need fuel, rest stops when I'm tired, and signs pointing me in the right direction. Your purpose works the same way. Start moving. Take the first step, even if you can't see the entire staircase. Write the first page of that book. Make the first phone call about that business. Enroll in that course. Apply for that position. The moment you demonstrate you're serious about your assignment, provision begins to flow. And here's another critical truth. Your purpose is never just about you. This is where many people get confused. They think discovering their purpose is about personal fulfillment, happiness, or success. Those things may come, yes, but your purpose is fundamentally about service. It's about what you were created to give, not just what you were meant to get. Every gift you possess is meant to solve a problem for someone else. Every talent is designed to meet a need in your generation. You weren't given your abilities to hoard them or to make yourself feel important. You were given your abilities to serve. And here's what most people miss. When you serve others with your gift, you simultaneously fulfill yourself. It's a divine paradox. The more you give away what's inside you, the more fulfilled you become. The more you solve problems for others, the more purposeful your own life feels. I've watched people chase happiness their entire lives, and they never find it. You know why? Because happiness is not a destination, it's a byproduct. It's the result of living in alignment with your purpose. When you use your gifts to benefit others, joy doesn't have to be pursued. It simply shows up. Think about the times in your life when you felt most alive. I'm willing to bet it wasn't when you were indulging yourself. It was when you were helping someone. When you solved a problem that seemed impossible. When you used your gift and saw someone's face light up with hope. That's when you felt most human, most connected to why you're here. Now, let me address something that stops many people from discovering their purpose. Fear. Specifically, the fear of insignificance. We live in a world obsessed with fame, with being seen, with going viral, and this obsession has distorted our understanding of purpose. People think that if their gift doesn't make them famous, it doesn't matter. That's a lie from the pit of hell. Your purpose is not measured by how many people know your name. It's measured by how faithfully you serve the assignment you've been given. Some of you are called to influence millions. Others are called to pour into 10 people with such depth that those 10 go on to change the world. Both are equally significant in the economy of heaven. The teacher who shapes young minds in a classroom of 30, she's fulfilling purpose. The engineer who designs systems that make life easier for thousands, he's fulfilling purpose. The mother who raises children with character and vision, she's fulfilling purpose. The entrepreneur who creates jobs and solves community problems, that's purpose in action. Stop comparing your assignment to someone else's. Comparison is the thief of joy and the assassin of purpose. God doesn't make duplicates, He makes originals. Your gift, in your context, for your generation, that's what matters. And here's the beautiful thing. When you stop competing, you start completing. You discover that the person you thought was your rival is actually your ally. Because their gift is opening doors yours can't open. Their voice is reaching ears yours can't reach. I've watched this happen over and over again. 2 ministers in the same city, both preaching the gospel. One thinks, if people go to his church, they won't come to mine. That's competition. That's scarcity thinking. But the mature one says, his style reaches the intellectuals, mine reaches the broken. We're not competing, we're covering more ground together. You see, God gave you your gift not to hoard it, but to release it. And when you release it without fear, without comparing, without trying to be someone else, that's when the multiplication happens. That's when your impact becomes exponential. Let me tell you what I mean by exponential impact. It's not about reaching more people, though that may happen. It's about reaching the right times people, the ones who need exactly what you carry, the ones who will be transformed by your specific gift, operating in your specific way. There's a young man I know who can fix anything mechanical, engines, electronics, you name it. He used to think, what's special about that? Everybody can fix things. But that's a lie. Everybody can't. And even those who can, they don't do it like him. He doesn't just fix the machine, he teaches you why it broke. He empowers you. That's his gift with his personality wrapped around it. Now he runs a program teaching young men in his community these skills. But more than skills, he's teaching them their value. He's showing them they don't have to be athletes or entertainers to matter. They can build, they can create, they can solve problems. That's exponential impact. One gift released authentically, creating a ripple effect. But here's what stops most people. It's not lack of talent. It's not even lack of opportunity. It's lack of permission. We're waiting for someone to validate us, to tell us we're good enough, ready enough, important enough. But here's what I discovered in my years of studying human potential. Asterisk, asterisk, permission is not a prerequisite for purpose. Asterisk, asterisk. It's not a requirement. It's not even relevant. You see, when God created you, He didn't create you incomplete. He didn't make you halfway and say, now go find someone to finish the job. You came fully loaded, fully authorized, fully licensed to be who you were born to be. Think about it this way. When a seed falls into the ground, does it wait for permission to become a tree? Does it send out a little memo to the other trees saying, excuse me, is it okay if I grow here? Do I have your approval? No, that seed doesn't need a committee meeting. It doesn't need validation from the forest. It has everything it needs encoded in its DNA. The blueprint is already inside. And so it is with you. The manufacturer doesn't need permission from the product. God doesn't need to ask you if you're ready. You don't need to ask others if you're allowed. The authorization was given the moment you took your first breath. But we've been conditioned differently, haven't we? We've been trained to wait, to sit, to raise our hand and hope we get called on. The whole educational system was built on this. Wait for the teacher to call your name. Wait for the boss to give you a promotion. Wait for the opportunity to knock. But purpose doesn't knock. Purpose doesn't wait outside hoping you'll hear it. Purpose breaks down doors. Purpose kicks through walls. Purpose doesn't ask, it announces. I remember talking to a young woman once who had an incredible gift for teaching. Brilliant mind. Could explain complex concepts in ways that made them simple. But she kept saying, I'm waiting for the right opportunity. I'm waiting for someone to give me a platform. And I said to her, who told you that you needed a platform? Who said someone else has to build your stage? You have a voice, use it. You have knowledge, share it. Start where you are with what you have. She looked shocked, like I just told her to break a sacred rule. That's what waiting for permission does to us. It makes us believe that our gifts are not legitimate until someone with a title says they are. But here's the truth that will set you free. God doesn't wait for your resume to be approved by a committee. He doesn't need a board meeting to decide if you're qualified. When He called Moses, Moses had a criminal record. When He called David, David was a teenager with a lunchbox. When He called Peter, Peter was a fisherman who couldn't even keep his mouth shut long enough to avoid saying the wrong thing. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And this is where so many of us get trapped. We look at our lack of credentials, our lack of connections, our lack of formal training, and we say, I'm not ready. But ready according to whose standard? The institutions? The organizations? The people who benefit from keeping you waiting? I want you to understand something that changed my entire life. Your assignment is not validated by human approval. Your calling is not authenticated by a certificate on a wall. Your purpose is not legitimized by a position someone gives you. Let me tell you about a young man I met in Zimbabwe. 23 years old. No formal theological training. But he had been studying, praying, teaching small groups of young people in his neighborhood. He came up to me after I spoke and said, Dr. Munroe, I believe God is calling me to teach His word, but the church leaders say I need to wait. They say I need at least 5 more years of observation before they'll consider me. I asked him one question. Are people being changed by what you're teaching them? He said, yes, sir. Young people who were involved in drugs and gangs, they're turning their lives around. Families are being restored. I said, then you don't need permission to continue. You need courage to obey God rather than men. Do you see what was happening? The fruit was already there. The evidence of his calling was already manifesting. But the system wanted him to pause the harvest to go through their process. That's like telling an apple tree to stop producing fruit until it gets certified by the Department of Agriculture. Your gift is already valid. Your calling is already authenticated, not by what someone says about you, but by what God does through you. And this is where most people get stuck. They're waiting for permission that's never coming. They're waiting for someone to validate what God already validated before the foundation of the world. Let me tell you something that will set you free. Your gift doesn't need human approval, it needs human activation. I've watched people with extraordinary gifts sit in the audience for decades, waiting for the pastor to call them forward, waiting for the organization to recognize them, waiting for the certificate, the title, the platform. And while they're waiting, the world is suffering from the absence of what's inside them. You know what breaks my heart? When I see someone with the cure sitting in silence because they don't have the credentials. Someone with the answer afraid to speak because they don't have the degree. Someone with the song refusing to sing because they don't have the record deal. Listen to me carefully. God doesn't call the equipped, He equips the called. Moses had a speech impediment. David was a shepherd boy. Gideon was hiding in a wine press. Rahab was a prostitute. Peter was uneducated. Paul was a murderer. The woman at the well had 5 failed marriages. God doesn't look at your resume. He looks at your availability. And here's what religion doesn't want you to know. When God gives you a gift, He bypasses the system. He doesn't need the approval of the elders, the board, or the committee. He releases it directly into you, and it becomes operational the moment you believe it and use it. That's why Jesus constantly frustrated the religious establishment. He kept healing on the Sabbath. He kept touching lepers. He kept eating with sinners. He kept operating outside their approval structure. Why? Because gifts from God don't need permission from man. I've seen this in my own life. When God called me to teach nations, I was a young man with no credentials. The religious system said, "Who do you think you are?" But something inside me said, "I know who called me." And I decided that obedience to the call was more important than approval from the crowd. That's when everything changed. Not when people recognized me. When I recognized the gift in me, I watched this transformation happen in real time. The moment I stopped waiting for someone to discover me and started developing what was already inside me, opportunities I couldn't have imagined began to appear. Not because the world changed, but because I changed. You see, validation is like oxygen. We think we need it from outside, but the truth is, you're already breathing. You already have everything you need to survive and thrive. The question is, are you going to wait for someone to tell you you're allowed to breathe deeply? Or are you going to fill your lungs right now? Let me take you deeper into this. There's a second misconception that keeps people trapped, and it's closely related to the first. Most people believe that recognition equals readiness. They think, when I get the platform, I'll be ready. When someone gives me the opportunity, I'll rise to the occasion. But that's backward thinking. The platform doesn't make you ready. Readiness attracts the platform. I learned this from observing nature. You know what a seed does underground? It doesn't wait for someone to come along and announce it's time to grow. It responds to the conditions around it, moisture, darkness, pressure, and it begins to develop. The seed doesn't see sunlight before it starts growing. It grows in complete darkness, pushing through soil, breaking through barriers, developing a root system that nobody sees. By the time that seed breaks through the surface, it's not a seed anymore. It's a plant. It didn't wait for visibility to start the transformation. The transformation is what made it visible. This is what I want you to understand today. Your gift, your purpose, your assignment, it's not waiting for a stage. It's waiting for you to stop waiting. It's ready right now, in the darkness of your current circumstances, to begin developing. But you have to make a decision. I made that decision in my 20s. I decided I was going to act like the teacher, the leader, the voice I believed I was called to be, whether anyone was listening or not. I started speaking to rooms of 5 people with the same intensity I'd give to 5,000. I prepared messages like they were going to change nations, even when they were only reaching neighborhoods. And here's what nobody tells you about that process. It's lonely, it's frustrating. There are moments when you question everything. But let me tell you something, those questions, that loneliness, that frustration, that's not a sign you're failing, that's a sign you're growing. That's a sign you're transitioning from who you were to who you're meant to become. You see, the caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by staying comfortable. It has to lock itself away in darkness, dissolve into what scientists call imaginal soup, literally breaking down its own body before it can emerge with wings. And during that process, if you could ask that caterpillar how it feels, I guarantee you it would say, "This is terrifying. I don't know what's happening to me." That's where many of you are right now. You're in the cocoon. You're in the transformation phase. And everyone around you is living their caterpillar life, crawling on the ground, and they're wondering why you've isolated yourself, why you're not at every party, why you're not participating in the same conversations anymore. They can't see what's happening inside you. They can't see that you're developing wings. And here's the truth about wings. You can't develop them in a crowd. You can't develop them while you're trying to keep up with everyone else's pace. You can't develop them while you're explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. I've watched this happen over and over again. People who are genuinely called to something greater start to shift their priorities, and suddenly everyone has an opinion. "You've changed," they say, and they don't mean it as a compliment. "You think you're better than us now," they accuse. "Remember where you came from." But see, remembering where you came from doesn't mean staying there. Honoring your roots doesn't mean refusing to grow branches. And the very people who tell you to remember where you came from are often the same people who will criticize you for trying to go somewhere different. So you have to make a choice. Are you going to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable? Are you going to dim your light so their eyes don't have to adjust? Are you going to apologize for the gift that God placed inside you just because it makes small-minded people feel insecure? Or are you going to stand firm in your season of preparation, even when it costs you relationships, even when it costs you popularity, even when it costs you the approval of people you once desperately wanted to impress? Because I'll tell you this, what you're building in private will eventually be revealed in public. And when that happens, those same people who questioned your isolation will want to know your secret. Let me tell you something that will change your perspective forever. Your season of preparation is not punishment, it's privilege. While everyone else is rushing to the stage, you're being given the rare gift of becoming someone worth listening to before you speak. You're being shaped, molded, refined. And that refining process, it requires heat, it requires pressure, it requires the kind of isolation that makes you uncomfortable. Think about this. A diamond doesn't form on the surface. It forms deep underground, under immense pressure, over an extended period of time. If you try to rush the process, all you get is coal that crumbles under the slightest pressure. But if you allow the process to complete, what emerges is something unbreakable, something valuable, something that catches the light in a way that makes people stop and stare. Your current season of preparation is that underground pressure chamber. And I know it's dark down there. I know it feels like nothing is happening. I know it seems like you're being buried. But what if I told you that you're not being buried, you're being planted? What if this isolation isn't about keeping you away from something, but about keeping you focused on becoming someone? See, the world will always celebrate the performance, but heaven celebrates the preparation. People applaud what they see on stage, but God is perfecting what he sees in secret. And here's what most people miss. The quality of your public ministry will never exceed the quality of your private devotion. You cannot give from an empty well. You cannot lead people to places you've never been. You cannot speak with authority about battles you've never fought. This is why the desert is not your destination, it's your preparation ground. It's where God strips away everything that's comfortable, everything that's familiar, everything you've been leaning on instead of him. In the desert, your degrees don't matter. Your bank account doesn't help you. Your connections can't save you. It's just you and God, and that's exactly the point. I've watched leaders skip this season. They go from calling to platform without ever going through the fire. And you can always tell there's something missing in their message. There's a shallowness in their wisdom. They can quote the scripture, but they haven't lived the scripture. They can tell you what the Bible says about suffering, but they've never suffered. They preach about faith, but they've never had to trust God when everything around them was falling apart. The desert teaches you things the classroom cannot. It teaches you how to hear God's voice when there are no other voices around. It teaches you how to worship when you don't feel like worshiping. It teaches you how to stand when every natural reason says you should fall. These are not lessons you learn in theory. These are lessons you learn in the trenches. And here's what's beautiful about the desert season. God is always with you there. He never sends you to a place where he isn't present. In fact, the desert is often where you'll experience his presence most intimately. When everything else is stripped away, when all the noise is silenced, when all the distractions are removed, that's when you hear him clearest. Moses met God in a burning bush in the wilderness. Elijah heard the still, small voice in a cave after running for his life. David wrote his most powerful psalms while hiding in desert caves from King Saul. Jesus emerged from the desert full of the power of the Spirit. The desert wasn't their punishment, it was their promotion. It was where they graduated from potential to power. So if you're in the desert right now, don't despise it. Don't rush through it. Don't try to escape it prematurely. Embrace it. Let it do its work in you. Because here's what I've learned. The wilderness is not your enemy. The wilderness is your teacher. It's not there to destroy you, it's there to develop you. It's not there to break you down, it's there to build you up into who you're meant to become. Think about it. Before David could wear a crown, he had to tend sheep in isolation. Before Joseph could govern Egypt, he had to serve in a prison cell. Before Moses could lead millions, he had to shepherd flocks in the desert for 40 years. The wilderness wasn't wasted time, it was preparation time. You see, God doesn't promote people who haven't been processed. He doesn't elevate individuals who haven't been tested. Because if you get to a position before you're ready for it, that position will destroy you. The very thing you prayed for will become the thing that breaks you because you don't have the character to sustain it. That's why the wilderness is a gift. It's not a curse, it's a classroom. It's where God teaches you what you cannot learn anywhere else. In the wilderness, you learn dependence. You learn humility. You learn patience. You learn to trust God when there's no visible evidence that things will get better. In the wilderness, all your superficial supports get stripped away. Your titles don't matter there. Your degrees don't help you there. Your bank account can't save you there. It's just you and God. And that's exactly where you need to be. I want you to understand something crucial. Wilderness experiences are never permanent. They're seasonal. The wilderness has an entrance and it has an exit. But the timing of your exit is not determined by your complaining. It's determined by your completion. You don't get out when you're tired of being there. You get out when you've learned what you need to learn. Too many people keep extending their wilderness season because they refuse to learn the lesson. They keep complaining, why me? Why now? Why this? Instead of asking, what am I supposed to learn here? What is God trying to develop in me? How is this preparing me for my next level? You see, when you start asking the right questions, you shift from being a victim to being a student. A victim says, why is this happening to me? A student says, what is this teaching me? The difference between these two positions is the difference between staying stuck and moving forward. I've learned something profound over the years. Every person who has ever accomplished anything significant, every person who has left a mark on this world, every person who has lived a life of true impact has one thing in common. They learn to see obstacles as assignments. They learn to view resistance as their training ground. They understood that the very thing trying to stop them was actually preparing them for where they were going. Think about Joseph again. When his brothers threw him in that pit, he didn't know he was being prepared to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. When he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, he didn't know he was learning integrity under pressure. When he was forgotten in prison by the butler he had helped, he didn't know he was being taught patience and trust in God's timing. Every dark moment was actually a classroom. Every setback was actually a setup. Every delay was actually development in disguise. And here's what blows my mind about Joseph's story. When he finally stood before Pharaoh, when he finally stepped into his purpose, everything he had been through suddenly made perfect sense. The rejection taught him humility. The slavery taught him servanthood. The false accusation taught him how to maintain character when no one was watching. The prison taught him how to lead in dark places. Every single experience was preparing him for the palace. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. It was all curriculum. That's why you can't quit during the test, because the test is actually preparing you for the testimony. The pressure is preparing you for the promotion. The wilderness is preparing you for the promised land. If you run from the process, you disqualify yourself from the promise. Let me tell you something that will change your perspective forever. God never promotes potential. He only promotes proof. And proof comes through process. You see, when you're in the waiting season, you think God has forgotten about you. You look around and see others being elevated, others getting their breakthrough, others walking in their promise. And you start to question, God, what about me? I've been faithful, I've been praying, I've been believing. When is it my turn? But here's what you don't understand. Those people you're watching, they already went through what you're going through now. You're seeing their platform, but you didn't witness their process. You're seeing their crowning, but you weren't there during their crushing. David wasn't anointed and immediately crowned. There were 13 years between the anointing and the throne. 13 years of running, hiding, being misunderstood, being betrayed. But those 13 years weren't wasted years. They were wilderness years. They were training years. Every cave became a classroom. Every enemy became an instructor. Every setback became a setup. When David finally sat on that throne, he wasn't the same shepherd boy who was anointed. He was a warrior king. He was a strategic leader. He knew how to handle pressure because the wilderness taught him. He knew how to handle betrayal because Saul trained him. He knew how to worship in the darkness because the cave was his seminary. This is why you cannot rush your season, because if you get promoted before you're processed, the position will destroy you. The very thing you prayed for will become the thing that breaks you. Not because the blessing was wrong, but because you weren't ready for it. I've watched people beg God for a business, and when they got it, they lost it within a year. Why? No character, no discipline, no preparation. I've seen people cry out for marriage, and when they got married, it became their greatest misery. Why? They weren't whole, they weren't healed, they weren't ready. The gift will take you where character cannot keep you. And when that happens, you don't just lose the position, you lose your dignity, your testimony, your integrity. This is why God protects you by processing you. But here's the beauty of God's process. He's not trying to stop you. He's trying to prepare you for what He's already prepared for you. Every delay is a development session. Every closed door is a character class. Every frustration is a faithfulness exam. God doesn't withhold. He waits until you're ready to sustain what He's about to release. I've watched people pray for years for a breakthrough. And when it finally comes, they're shocked by how quickly things unfold. But it wasn't quick, it was timely. God wasn't moving slowly. You were being refined intentionally. The waiting season wasn't wasted, it was working. While you thought nothing was happening, God was building the internal infrastructure to support the external blessing. Think about this. A building's foundation takes months, sometimes years, to complete. But once the foundation is set, the visible structure goes up rapidly. People drive by and say, wow, that building went up fast. But they didn't see the deep work happening underground. They didn't see the soil testing, the foundation pouring, the rebar placement, the curing time. All they see is the sudden emergence of something impressive. That's your life right now. You're in the foundation phase. You're underground. Nobody sees it. Nobody applauds it. It feels slow, monotonous, even pointless at times. But God is doing precision work. He's testing the soil of your character. He's pouring the concrete of your convictions. He's setting the steel of your spiritual strength. And when He's finished with the foundation, the visible breakthrough will come so fast it will shock everyone, including you. But you cannot rush the foundation. You cannot microwave maturity. You cannot instant message integrity. Character development happens in the furnace of time, tested by trials, proven by pressure. And the question is not whether God can bless you now. The question is whether you can manage His blessing responsibly when it arrives. This is why God often delays the answer, not to punish you, but to prepare you. He's building the container while you're praying for the content. You're asking for the harvest, but He's developing the root system. You want the stage, but He's working on your substance. And understand this, a premature blessing can become your greatest curse if you're not spiritually mature enough to steward it properly. I've seen people pray for years for a financial breakthrough. And when it finally comes, they lose it all within months because they never developed the discipline of management. They got the money, but they didn't get the character that sustains money. I've watched ministries explode into prominence overnight, only to implode just as quickly because the leader's character couldn't carry the weight of their calling. The gift was there, but the integrity wasn't. The anointing was present, but the accountability was absent. You see, God is more interested in who you're becoming than in what you're receiving. He's more concerned about your character than your comfort. Because He knows that without the right character, every blessing becomes a burden. Every gift becomes a trap. Every promotion becomes a platform for your destruction. This is why some of your greatest seasons of growth will come wrapped in your most difficult moments of waiting. Think about Joseph again. Potiphar's house was preparation. The false accusation was preparation. The forgotten promise in prison was preparation. Every injustice, every delay, every disappointment was building the internal strength he would need to govern Egypt. God wasn't just giving him a dream about his future, He was constructing the foundation that could support that future. The throne was ready before Joseph was. Egypt was waiting. The position was available, but Joseph wasn't ready, and a premature promotion would have destroyed him. The same is true for you. Your opportunity may already exist, but you're not yet equipped to walk into it. Your business idea might be brilliant, but you haven't developed the discipline to execute it. Your ministry calling might be genuine, but you haven't cultivated the humility to serve effectively in it. Your relationship destiny might be real, but you haven't healed from the wounds that would sabotage it. This is why frustration becomes your constant companion. You're trying to access tomorrow's opportunities with yesterday's emotional maturity. You're attempting to inhabit a new season with old patterns still running your internal software. And here's what most people never realize. The delay is not punishment. The delay is preparation. The wilderness is not God forgetting about you. The wilderness is God protecting you from a promise you're not yet ready to steward. Think about the Israelites. They could have reached the promised land in 11 days. 11 days. But it took them 40 years. Why? Not because God was slow, not because the journey was geographically complicated, but because the generation that left Egypt still had Egypt inside of them. They had slave mentalities trying to possess land meant for warriors. They had complaint patterns trying to build a nation. They had dependency mindsets trying to govern themselves. The land was ready, but they were not. Your promise might be ready right now. The opportunity might already exist. The door might actually be open, but you are not ready to walk through it without destroying yourself and everything the promise was meant to produce. So what does God do? He puts you in a holding pattern, not to torture you, but to transform you, not to deny you, but to develop you, not to withhold from you, but to work within you until you match the magnitude of what He's called you to carry. I've watched people pray for businesses and get bitter when they don't manifest immediately. But God is saying, I can't give you that business yet because you still treat people with contempt when you're stressed. I'm not withholding success from you. I'm protecting your future employees from your unhealed trauma responses. I've seen people cry out for marriages while simultaneously refusing to address their control issues, their unresolved anger, their patterns of emotional manipulation. And God is whispering, I love you too much to give you a spouse to damage. This wait is not rejection, it's refinement. The wait is not about punishment, it's about preparation. And here's what most people miss. While you're waiting, God is working. While you're in the wilderness, He's building your infrastructure. While you're in what feels like a holding pattern, He's establishing connections, positioning people, arranging circumstances that you cannot see. You think you're just sitting still, but in the spiritual realm, there's a flurry of activity on your behalf. Angels are being dispatched, doors are being unlocked, hearts are being prepared to receive what you're carrying. Your delay is not empty time, it's construction time. I remember a young entrepreneur who came to me frustrated. Dr. Munroe, he said, I've had this business vision for 3 years. I've written the plan. I've got the passion. But every door keeps closing. Every investor says, no, I don't understand what God is waiting for. I asked him one question. Have you built the character that can sustain the success you're asking for? His face changed. Because here's what he hadn't considered. He was asking for $1 million blessing with $100 character infrastructure. He wanted empire influence with local integrity. He wanted to be trusted with much, but he was still lying on his tax returns, still cutting corners, still breaking his word when it was convenient. God wasn't withholding the business. God was saying, if I give you this now, it will destroy you. The money will expose what's not healed. The pressure will reveal what's not mature. The platform will amplify what's not pure. 3 years later, after he stopped fighting the process and started embracing the preparation, every door that had been closed swung wide open. But by then, he was different. By then, he had become someone who could steward what he had once only dreamed about. This is the mystery of divine delay. God is more interested in who you're becoming than in what you're getting. He knows that if he gets the who right, the what will take care of itself. But if he gives you the what before the who is ready, both you and the blessing will be destroyed. Let me tell you something that will revolutionize your perspective on waiting. Every delay you're experiencing right now is actually a divine classroom. You're not in a holding pattern, you're in a training program. And God is the most patient, most thorough teacher you'll ever have. Think about it this way. When a potter shapes clay, the spinning wheel looks chaotic to the untrained eye. Round and round it goes, seemingly going nowhere. But the potter knows exactly what he's doing. Every revolution serves a purpose. The clay isn't just spinning, it's being centered, shaped, refined with every turn. What looks like repetition is actually progression. What feels like going in circles is actually the process of becoming something beautiful. This is your life right now. You might feel like you're on a wheel, going around and around, facing the same challenges, the same frustrations, the same disappointments. But God's hands are on you, and every revolution is shaping you into the masterpiece he envisioned before you were born. Here's what most people miss. The waiting room is where your character is built. Your dream is valuable, yes, but your character is priceless. Your vision has a price tag, but your integrity is beyond measure. God can replace your dream, but he cannot replace your character. Only you can build that, and only through the fires of delay, disappointment, and difficulty. I've seen people receive promotions they weren't ready for, and it destroyed them. I've watched individuals come into money before they developed the character to manage it, and it ruined their families. I've witnessed ministries explode in growth before the leader had the maturity to handle it, and the collapse was devastating not just for them, but for everyone connected to them. This is why God guards the timing so carefully. He's not withholding from you, he's protecting you, and everyone your blessing will eventually touch. Your delay is their protection too. You see, premature elevation creates casualties. I've watched it happen. A person gets promoted before their character can sustain it, and they don't just fail, they take others down with them. Their family suffers. Their team fractures. People who believed in them get wounded. This is what God is preventing when he makes you wait. The blessing you're asking for isn't just about you anymore. It stopped being just about you the moment God planted that seed in your spirit. Now it's about legacy. It's about generations. It's about people whose names you don't even know yet, who will be impacted by what God is preparing to do through you. Let me be very clear about something. God is more committed to your purpose than you are. You get tired of waiting. You get discouraged. You question whether it's even worth it anymore. But God never loses sight of what he's building. While you're focused on the delay, he's focused on the dynasty. While you're counting the days, he's counting the generations. This is why comparison is so dangerous during this season. You look at someone else's harvest and think God is playing favorites, but you don't know what they endured in their winter. You didn't see them planted in darkness. You didn't watch them almost die under the weight of their own soil. You only see the fruit, and you assume it came easy. Stop comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Stop measuring your behind the scenes against their highlight reel. Your timeline is custom designed for your specific assignment. What God is doing in you cannot be rushed, cannot be replicated, and cannot be compared to anyone else's journey. I'm telling you right now, the waiting is doing something in you that success never could. It's teaching you dependence. It's building your prayer life. It's deepening your relationship with God himself. When the blessing finally comes, you won't worship the blessing, you'll worship the one who gave it, because you'll remember what it cost to get there. You see, there's a principle I've discovered in Scripture that most people overlook. The greater the promise, the longer the process. God doesn't do this to torture you. He does it to transform you. Because here's what I know. If God gave you what you prayed for yesterday, you couldn't handle what comes with it today. The disciples spent 3 years with Jesus. 3 years of watching, learning, questioning, failing, trying again. And even after all that time, even after witnessing miracles and hearing the greatest teachings ever spoken, Jesus still told them, wait in Jerusalem, don't go out yet. You're not ready. They had to wait for the Holy Spirit because the assignment ahead required power they didn't yet possess. Your waiting period is your equipping season. Every day you wait with faith instead of frustration, you're being fitted for the dimensions of your destiny. You're developing spiritual muscles you didn't even know you needed. Patience, endurance, unwavering trust. The ability to stand when everything in you wants to sit down and quit. I want you to think about something. Every hero of faith we celebrate, Abraham, Moses, Joseph, David, Paul, they all have one thing in common. They all waited. And they all became somebody different during the wait than they were when the promise was first given. Abraham wasn't ready to father nations when God first spoke to him. Moses wasn't ready to deliver millions when he was in Pharaoh's palace. Joseph wasn't ready to save nations when he was his father's favorite son. The wait refined them. It revealed what was really in them. It removed what didn't belong and reinforced what did. And when their moment finally came, they weren't just ready, they were irresistible. Their character matched their calling. Their capacity matched their assignment. So when you feel like you're waiting too long, remember this. God isn't late. He's thorough. He's not withholding your blessing. He's preparing you to steward it with wisdom, carry it with humility, and multiply it with integrity. The waiting isn't wasted time. It's invested time. And the return on that investment will be greater than anything you could have imagined. The problem is, most people have never been taught how to wait productively. They think waiting means doing nothing. They think waiting means sitting on the sidelines with their hands folded. But that's not biblical waiting. That's not the kind of waiting that prepares you for greatness. When Isaiah said, those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength, he wasn't talking about passive inactivity. The Hebrew word for wait, there is times, kava times. It means to bind together, to collect, to gather strength. It's an active word. It's a word that implies preparation, anticipation, expectation. You see, while you're waiting, you should be gathering. While you're waiting, you should be learning. While you're waiting, you should be building your capacity to handle what's coming. Because when your moment arrives, you won't have time to prepare. You'll need to be ready. Think about it this way. If I told you right now that in 6 months you're going to run a marathon, what would you do? Would you just sit on your couch for 6 months and then show up on race day? Of course not. You'd start training. You'd start running shorter distances. You'd change your diet. You'd build your endurance. You'd prepare your body for what's coming. That's exactly what waiting should look like in your life. Your promise is the marathon. Your dream is the marathon. And this season you're in right now, this is your training ground. So I want to ask you, what are you doing while you're waiting? Are you complaining about how long it's taking? Or are you preparing for when it arrives? Are you bitter about the delay? Or are you getting better during the delay? The greatest tragedy isn't waiting for your dream. The greatest tragedy is wasting your waiting. It's arriving at your moment unprepared. It's getting your opportunity and not being ready to steward it. I've seen this happen too many times. People pray for years for a breakthrough. They beg God for an opportunity. Then when it finally comes, they're not ready. They haven't developed the character to sustain it. They haven't built the discipline to maintain it. They haven't cultivated the wisdom to manage it. And you know what happens? They lose it as quickly as they got it. The promotion they prayed for becomes the pressure that breaks them. The business they dreamed of becomes the burden that crushes them. The relationship they longed for becomes the responsibility they can't handle. Why? Because they didn't use their waiting season wisely. They didn't prepare. They didn't grow. They didn't become the person who could carry what they were asking for. Don't let that be your story. I want to tell you something that might sting a little, but it comes from a place of deep love. Your dream is not about you. Your vision is not about you. Your purpose is not about you. It's about the people who need what you're supposed to deliver. It's about the solution you were born to provide. It's about the generation that's waiting for you to step into your assignment. And this is where so many people get it wrong. They think personal development is selfish. They think working on themselves is self-centered. But the truth is, refusing to grow is the most selfish thing you can do. Because every day you stay small, you're denying the world what it needs from you. Every day you refuse to deal with your character flaws, your emotional wounds, your limiting beliefs. You're holding hostage the blessing that's supposed to flow through you to others. The sculptor doesn't chip away at the marble because he hates the stone. He does it because he loves the masterpiece that's trapped inside. And God is the master sculptor. He's chipping away at your pride, your fear, your insecurity, not because he's angry with you, but because he loves the masterpiece he put inside you. And he loves the people who are waiting for that masterpiece to emerge. So when life gets hard, when the pruning gets painful, when it feels like everything is being stripped away, ask yourself this question: what is God preparing me for? What is he qualifying me to carry? Because I promise you, the pressure has a purpose. The wilderness has a reason. The waiting has meaning. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. You're not being overlooked. You're being developed. You're not being forgotten. You're being positioned. And the same God who gave you the vision is committed to giving you the character to sustain it. But here's what you need to understand. Character development is not passive. You have to participate in your own transformation. You can't just pray and hope you magically become disciplined. You have to practice discipline. You can't just wish you were more patient. You have to choose patience in moments when everything in you wants to react. You can't just desire integrity. You have to make integrity-based decisions when no one's watching. God provides the grace, but you provide the effort. He gives the strength, but you take the steps. This is a partnership. This is collaboration between heaven and earth. God will never do what he gave you the ability to do. He will never walk for you, but he'll give you legs. He'll never think for you, but he gave you a mind. He'll never speak for you, but he gave you a mouth. This is the divine design. So when you ask God to do what he already equipped you to do, you're actually asking him to violate his own principle. You're asking him to reverse creation. And God doesn't work that way. Now let me take you deeper into this partnership. When you begin to understand that God's way is to work through you, not just for you, everything changes. Your prayer life changes. Your work ethic changes. Your entire approach to life transforms. You stop waiting and you start walking. You stop wishing and you start working. You stop hoping and you start building. Because you understand that you are not a spectator in God's plan, you are a participant. You are not an audience member, you are an actor. You are not a passenger, you are a partner. And here's what excites me about this truth. When you partner with God, you can't fail. I want you to hear that. When you partner with God in the work he's given you to do, failure is not an option, because God doesn't fail. But partnership requires something. It requires that you show up. It requires that you bring what you have. Remember the boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish? He didn't have much, but he brought what he had. And Jesus didn't create food out of nothing that day. He multiplied what was already there. The boy had to bring his lunch. Jesus multiplied it. That's a pattern. You bring the little you have, and God makes it much. You bring the seed, God brings the harvest. You bring the effort, God brings the increase. You bring the obedience, God brings the outcome. But if you don't bring anything, there's nothing for God to multiply. If you don't plant the seed, there's nothing for God to grow. If you don't take the step, there's no journey for God to guide. So I'm telling you today, stop asking God to do what he already empowered you to do. Stop praying when you should be moving. Stop waiting for a miracle when you should be working toward a result. God is waiting on you.